You are listening to Climatic Scale, a podcast about what it really takes to scale climate solutions. My name is Aneri Pradhan, host and co-founder of Climatic Group. Utilities are under enormous pressure to decarbonize, modernize infrastructure, and adapt to rapidly changing customer and grid needs. But large organizations often struggle to innovate at startup speed. So today we're unpacking how one of Europe's leading utilities approaches innovation, partnerships, and practice. And I'm very excited to have as our guest Fabian Kazicki, who's the head of corporate development at Wien Energie. Welcome, Fabian.
Thank you, Aneri, for having me.
Absolutely. So first, tell us about Wien Energie. How would you describe the scale and scope of the utility, and what role does innovation play inside of it?
Sure. So Wien Energie is a local utility from Vienna, one of the largest in the German-speaking European context. We are operating two of the largest gas-fired power stations in Austria. We're having the fifth largest district heating and fourth largest district cooling grid in the European Union here in Vienna. We have about 2 million customers in electricity, gas, and heating. We're operating about 3,000 charging points in and around Vienna. We aim to have about 1.8 gigawatts of renewable energy in our portfolio by 2030, most of that from wind power, but also from solar and small-scale hydropower. And one fact that is most of the time overlooked, we're operating 4 waste incineration plants, which feed into the district heating grid. So we are thermally treating about every 4th ton of waste in Austria. The second part of your question is, what role does innovation play within Wien Energie? I would start from our strategic goals. We have 4 different dimensions in our strategic goals. The one is sustainability. We aim to be carbon net neutral by 2040. The next one is customer satisfaction. Here we want to be the number 1 among our main competitors. Security of supply. In terms of availability of our plants, we want to be in the top quartile in the German-speaking area. And the last one is about profitability. We want to maintain the same profitability level as before the crisis. And now looking forward, we see that particularly when it comes to profitability, that most of where we make money currently will not be there anymore by 2040. Why is that? Because gas-fired power generation is not future-proof. We will see a transition towards renewables, and that means for us that we need to transition our business portfolio. And here innovation comes in. Some of these revenue streams are not yet there. We do not even think about it, and that needs to be driven forward by innovation. Important for us is that innovation needs to be thought together with business challenges. And within this realm, we have 3 different departments, I would say. We have the innovation team in my group, we have business development, and we have research. While innovation is mainly looking into what are the future challenges of the business units and try to solve that together, our business development team looks into completely new opportunities that are scalable, that are digital, that we can bring into life. And research is more focused on the technological long-term perspective.
Thank you for outlining how innovation works within Wien. What led you into innovation and startup collaboration work within the utility sector?
So we are collaborating with startups for many years now, simply because we've noticed that there is a rapid transition that we're seeing in the energy system, and we need to stay open to new mindsets, to new ideas. And that's what we see that we can get from startups. We need a certain speed of innovation. We need to think more properly about how to integrate IT components, the digital world. What do we do with the whole environment of flexibility? How do we exploit those opportunities? And there we see that we cannot do this all on ourselves. We need collaboration, and startups can enrich the ideas that we have and can bring the speed to the table that we need.
So I love that you and Wien Energie have this philosophy. I've worked with a lot of utilities that are just very scared of working with startups. They fear that they will not be around tomorrow. And so there's a lot of fear involved. What makes Wien Energie more receptive towards working with outside innovators?
Where you see opportunities, there are risks. Of course, startups can go bankrupt, things will not work, and that has happened in the past when we worked with startups. But I think you can increase the acceptance with your internal stakeholders by just showing that it can work. And given the fact that we have done this for many years now, we have some proof points where we can say this would not have been possible without startups. And that can increase the acceptance. Having clear KPIs and saying, okay, I have a clear challenge. There's a problem in the business unit that we try to solve together with a startup. And we, from the outset, say, these are the KPIs that will measure success. That increases acceptance, and that's what we're trying.
Nice. So how does Wien Energie actually identify the startups it works with? And do you rely on outside accelerators or partners, venture clienting? What's your strategy?
Maybe I will answer your question, but maybe coming back to what I see as the tasks of the innovation team here at Wien Energie. So on the one hand side, before we actually identify the startups, we do some trend analysis and outlook to see what are the topics that will be relevant, where we need to then occasionally also work with startups. We need, in order to increase the acceptance of working with startups, develop an innovation culture within Wien Energie. Not everybody is jumping up from the chair when we're coming around with an innovative idea. We need to have those proof points where we can scale concrete projects. And another big component is that we need to bring together different stakeholders. How do we identify startups at Wien Energie? We usually do this scouting with a partnership. Here, for the last 3 years, we have partnered with the Climate Lab. It's an innovation center here in Vienna, built up with the Impact Hub. And they do have, for us, pretty effective ways to attract highly relevant startups. They have their outreach and scouting partners, so that we usually have some specific challenges, specific problems that we put out there, and then see if we can find startups that can provide us with solutions for these problems.
And what makes a startup stand out in this process? If they apply to this Climate Lab program, how do you navigate in the applications and decide, yes, this one, not this one?
It's not always easy. There are some tricky decisions, but I would say 3 things. The first one is, does the startup have a good understanding, a very good understanding of our problem? Can they take our perspective, and is it just a standard slide deck that they send over and try to present? Or have they understood what is the challenge that Wien Energie faces in this business unit? The second one is, we look for a solid team. Are these people that know what they're talking about? Are they motivated? Are they engaged? Do they know that they will face challenges working with the utility? And the third thing that we look at is, do they have a proven track record? We don't need to have hundreds of thousands of tens of projects that have been already successfully completed. But of course, 1, 2, 3 do help. And by that, we can, of course, have more confidence and then choose steps built on that.
And you described the know your problem very well. And I've also heard that also shared by others on this podcast, that startups don't always come with a solution designed for the problem the client is facing. Is there a way to better prepare startups on understanding your problems? You communicate that openly? How does startups understand your problems?
Yes, we try to do that. For example, we engage with startups by the Climate Lab. Just earlier this year, we created a new format together with the business agency Vienna and actually another utility from Lower Austria, where we invited a handful of startups and we engaged with them. It was not a classical startups pitch. We say what we like, what we don't like, but more of a conversation. Why did we do that? Of course, because we are interested in interesting solutions from the startups, but we also wanted to give back some of the insights from a utility. How does the regulatory framework look like? What needs to be considered? What are internal processes that we need to respect within a utility, be it data security, software requirements, and so on. And also, build up an understanding of the management buy-in that you need to create in order to be successful. That's what we try to do. But of course, you can, as a startup, always look into our publications. We're very open. You find a lot of stuff on our websites on what we're doing, and then just engage, ask questions. What is important for us?
Yeah. So can you share a startup collaboration that was a real success story for Wien Energie?
Yeah, maybe one I would like to share from the year 2024 when we entered a collaboration with a German startup called Kauz AI. What was it about? It was that many years ago, we developed a chatbot. It was one of the first ones. But of course, nowadays, with artificial intelligence taking place and so on, our chatbot is no longer the smartest in town. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to increase the functionalities, develop it further. And we came up with what we call a digital product advisor together with the startup that is able to advise our clients on the right tariff, the right product to choose in several languages. It's working intuitively. And we even won a Customer Excellence Award in the DACH area for this product. What makes me really proud is that just a few months after we completed the POC and the Innovation Challenge, it was already live on our website, and it is still, and helps us to gain new customers and keep existing customers.
Amazing. So just to dive a little deeper on this, when you started working with them, what did the pilot process look like?
So usually what we do is pilot projects run about 6 to 12 months. Initially, when we sit together with a startup, we try to explain our problem. We need to come to a common understanding of the problem definition. Then we discuss how could we implement such a POC. We define clear objectives in order then after 6 months or a little bit longer to say, was it a success? Can we enter into a potential long-term agreement or can we not? And in the meantime and beforehand, of course, there are lots of processes that we have to navigate. I can go into that in a bit more detail if that's of interest, but that would be the rough framework.
Nice. Yeah, I think the processes are very interesting because a lot of our listeners are, what kind of internal alignment do you have to do? What other processes should startups be aware of?
Yeah. In terms of internal alignment, what we've noticed and what we learned over the last few years is that you need to have the buy-in from top management. If you don't have that, you might be able to start an innovation project. You might even finish it, but it will never scale. So what we do is we identify together with the business unit a challenge, and then we involve them very closely in the innovation process. That's, I would say, one of the preconditions that you need to meet. And then there are some technical and operational hurdles that you need to navigate. For example, what we learned a lot was around the procurement process. What happened before is that we had a very lean procurement process, but then when we wanted to expand our collaboration with the startup, we had to enter a tender. Not the smartest solution if you already know whom to choose and with whom you want to collaborate, but you need to then go into a tender. So that's why we had quite a few discussions with our procurement department. At the beginning, they were not super happy, but nowadays they're a very strong partner of the whole innovation process, which is at the beginning a little bit cumbersome. I have to admit that when we work with startups, but once we have cleared this procurement hurdle, we can work with the startups for many months into the future. And then, of course, there are some technical barriers you need to overcome. The IT, legal, you have to see, does the solution of a startup fit into your IT landscape? Do you breach any data security issues? Which is not always the most interesting thing. And at least in my mind, a little bit hard to get together with innovation. But once they are overcome, and we can do that, then you're actually free to tackle the real problems.
So that was great. And I think one thing you said that caught my attention was you had to get the top management buy-in for the pilots to scale and not just remain pilots. So if I could peek behind the scenes or be a fly on the wall, how does that work exactly? Do you have to convince your C-suite? do you have to bring the startup into those conversations with the C-suite? Or what kind of materials do you use? Is it KPIs or white papers? Yeah, you could walk us through what that looks like.
Actually, we need to convince the top management that the problem that we want to tackle is the right problem. It's more on that level. And once we have done that, the selection of the startups, that's no longer done by the top management, because here you need to bring on people that have experience on the ground and can say, yes, this solution will work with our systems, and I believe in the team, I believe in their solution. When it then comes to taking the decision on scaling, that's where we bring in the top management again. We have there, in my opinion, a fairly well-established process by now where we need to tick a few boxes. And then we say that we do only continue with the collaboration if we have the departmental head that says, yes, I'm ready to sponsor that project and go with you, the innovation department and the startup, into the next round. If we do not have the buy-in from the department head, we will not do it.
So if I was a startup working with you, and for what you just told me, there's a lot of stakeholders involved, right? There's you and your team. There's the business unit head, department head that would be a final decision maker. But then there's also the top management that have to be convinced that my solution is ready for rollout. So what should I do to position my company, if I was a startup, for success so that doesn't just end as a pilot, but actually does get rolled out?
So I actually, top management and department head, that's more or less the same in our case.
Okay.
You don't have to convince the CEO in order to a startup to work with a startup. I would say it's, as a startup, you should look into the things that you can change, that you can influence. And what can you do as a startup? You can come up with a convincing team and with a convincing solution that fits to the problem that the utility has. You don't have to play the game of internal politics. That's up to your stakeholders, be it either in the innovation department or in the business unit. But as long as you can demonstrate that your solution will solve the problem of the utility and will create a benefit, then people will believe in you.
Were there any partnerships that you found worked really well in terms of moving from pilot to rollout?
I think there is this example of Kauz AI with their digital product advisor that is now on our website. Another one is a startup that we work with called Kraken. Here, this is an example from sustainable procurement, where we wanted to understand much better what are the emissions that are involved in procurements, particularly of capital goods. And that is something that we initiated via one of our innovation challenges and is now used in collaboration with procurement and several business units within Wien Energie.
Okay, that's super interesting. And were there any cases where you felt those two startups in particularly worked well with the utility and the decision makers and the stakeholders, or any stories you could share on that?
I think what makes a very good startup stand out from good ones is that they bring in the adaptability, flexibility. Sometimes it happens that the solution that you propose first does not fit the problem. You need to adapt it. You wanted to implement a product, but maybe first we need to do an analysis. We need to adapt the product to the circumstances in order to make them fit into the IT infrastructure, for example. And that's what we've seen with several collaborations that we did with startups. And it's the adaptability that makes the collaboration more effective. So that's one of the points that I would highlight.
And utilities and startups do operate though at very different speeds. Have you seen examples or collaborations where the startup wanted to move faster than Wien Energie was able to, and how did you remedy that?
Yeah, this is a classical tension that comes up. Sometimes when we have startups that do participate in our innovation challenge, they think that's the green light, now we will implement something. That's not how it works. So we try to clarify that execution depends on the outcome of the pilot phase, and we need to evaluate the solution, and that it then can come to a collaboration. For example, something that is very important for us is that we share the pilot agreement details early on, how we will work together, that we have a small contractual framework. Some startups are not very interested in doing that and having the site because they say, yeah, okay, come on, can we just start doing the project?
Yes.
That's okay. But the problem is later on, it will slow down the project initiation for us. And that might then be a frustration because we cannot go into the direct project implementation after the decision has been taken. As I mentioned before, the tender process can be more demanding than just a simple application form running through our procurement process. We offer a lot of support because some of that even needs to be done in German, and we do operate across Europe with startups. That, of course, can take time, and there we see tensions arising. Our remedy is to be as open and transparent about our processes as early as possible.
Yeah. And speaking of international companies applying to RFPs, we actually had as a guest Tecloman in an earlier episode, who is also won a bid with Wien Energie. Any tips for startups and how they prepare these RFPs?
I think what worked with Tecloman very well is that they understood what we were looking for. As you said, we have implemented with them 5 megawatts, 12 megawatt hours battery project in Schafflerhofstraße. This is one of our actually PV utility scale plants in Vienna. In my view, a very special one because it's agro-photovoltaics. We have some sheep that roam around in the area of the PV plants. I think this worked quite well. They did not only come up with a very good proposal, but made sure that we could implement the solution by bringing in their experts. And very, very much looking forward to seeing the solution help us to integrate renewable power into the electricity system, because as you might be aware, Aneri, we have lots of hours nowadays in the European energy system with negative power prices, and there it's more and more important in the future to shift electricity into those hours where it is needed.
Yeah, absolutely. So what innovation areas are most strategically important for Wien Energie over the next few years?
We have a clear innovation strategy because we say, yes, we are a large local utility, but still in the global context, we're pretty small. And so we need to focus and say, what is it that we're not doing, but what are the areas that we innovate? We have 4 of them. We say that we want to innovate in the area of digitalization. And the second one is circular economy, where we see a lot of potential, looking into waste streams, seeing what can we do with end-of-life applications and so on. The third one is decarbonized energy systems, particularly referring to heat and cold. I mentioned beforehand that we have very large district cooling and heating systems, and we see a big potential there, particularly in the direction of decarbonized systems and flexible systems. And the last one is electric mobility. We are a large player in that market. We want to grow this business very fast. And we see that there are a few challenges ahead of us that are not yet solved, where innovation can play a big role.
Nice. And in more immediate short term, what kinds of startups or solutions are you actively looking for?
Currently, right now, we do have our 10th Innovation Challenge. So that's our accelerator program up and running. And we are very concretely looking for two topics where we are looking for startups. One of them is around electric mobility. What is the challenge that we face there is the more charging points you operate, of course, the more issues you will see. And our customers expect from us that they are running 100% of the time, that they do not face any problems. But this will happen in the future. And here we're looking for an AI solution, an AI voice solution that can increase the first solution rate. So basically solve most of the problems directly that happen, and if not, come up with a ticketing system. And the second one is about a short-term solar forecasting solution. An issue that we're facing more and more is that solar photovoltaic, particularly the one that is a rooftop solar photovoltaic, is increasing more and more in Austria, also in Vienna. And if we then see a cloud appearing in front of the sun here in Vienna, that changes the demand and supply patterns quite significantly, which can lead to big costs. And here we just want to become better and are looking for innovative solutions in order to help us improve our forecasting capabilities.
Amazing. So that call for applications is live right now through Climate
It
Lab
is.
till when?
Correct. You can find it on our website, Climate Lab. If you click on the Innovation Challenge 10, then you will see these two issues mentioned.
Amazing. We'll make sure to share that link with the recording. In terms of the energy ecosystem, so not just Wien Energie, but where do you see are the biggest unmet opportunities for startups?
I think there are many, but from my personal perspective, one is certainly the topic of flexibility. I mentioned beforehand that we're seeing negative price hours more and more occurring in the European energy system. And using the flexibility potentials that we have within small scale households, that's EV charging, that's batteries, that is heat pumps, and so on. That is a big challenge because you have a pretty diverse value chain and you need to bring different players together, but also using the flexibility potential of the heating sector. I think there we can still use some innovative idea. The whole topic about customer-centric energy services, something that I mentioned where we already did some first steps with a startup. We can do much more in order to improve the customer journey for our customers. And then the whole topic about circularity. I mentioned before circular economy. What do we do with end-of-life applications? How do we integrate circularity into the procurement process? There we can improve a lot, and the energy industry has a lot of unmet demands there.
Nice. And what advice would you give to, let's say, a very early company, maybe that is trying to demonstrate their technologies or find their first customer or second customer in the utility space? What advice would you give them?
What advice? I think try to understand what are the big unmet problems out there. Try to see it from your customer's perspective. What is the challenge that the utility in our case is facing, and how can your solution, your startup solution, help solve that problem? Start with a very concrete use case. Don't lose yourself in nice slides that, look nice, but then you will not capture the attention of your counterparts. And play the long term, build up relations. Most of the time, startups will think that the processes are far too slow. When will the money come in? When will we have a project implemented? Yes, just bring this understanding to the table that it will take time and that it's about building relations. Just maybe one example, sometimes it has happened to us that we worked with startups and then they told us, hey guys, up to you if you want to collaborate with us, but if you don't accept to work with us, we will enter the market in any case and will be a fierce challenger. This is not going to work. Don't try to do that.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I had Verbund also on an episode, and she also shared a story about how a startup say you have to pay within 30 days or we cannot work together. And they were like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. So I think there needs to be an understanding on both sides. Utilities need to become more flexible, but also startups need to know it's about a partnership where you need to invest into.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks so much, Fabienne, for your insights. I think this was a very insightful conversation to really help startups figure out how to navigate utilities. And so I really appreciate it. Thanks to our listeners for tuning into Climatic Scale. You can find our other episodes on climaticgroup.substack.com, our website, on Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Thanks again, Fabienne.
Thank you very much, Aneri. It was fun. Thanks.